When you use object snaps in AutoCAD, you can also utilize object snap tracking, or OTRACK for short. Now this again is controlled down here in the drafting settings on the status bar. Now I'm going to switch off 3D object snap because we're going to be working in a 2D environment, moving our 3D solid to the center of this rectangle here. Now I've drawn this rectangle using the polyline command, and I don't know the actual physical sizes of that rectangle at all, but I can utilize my object snap tracking using the midpoint of each side. So the first thing I do is make sure that midpoint is switched on in my object snaps. That's this one here. So I right click over object snaps, and if midpoint isn't switched on, which it isn't at the moment, there's no blue square around it, I click on the word midpoint, and midpoint is now part of my running object snaps. That's a very helpful little shortcut menu setup for snaps there. Now we need to make sure that object snap tracking is on. Now if we move back down here to the status bar and hover, you can see this icon here, object snap tracking. Can you see that there? When I click on it, the command line says object snap tracking off. When I click on it again, object snap tracking on. I'm going to right click over it and go to settings, and you'll notice that object snap has to be on as well as object snap tracking here. They both have to be switched on. Midpoint is on. Remember we set that a moment ago. So midpoint is on as well. I'll OK that now. Now, I want to move my 3D solid into the center of this rectangle here. So what you might be doing here is this might be a metal plate. This might be a metal component, and you're placing it in the center of that plate to be welded to that plate, for example. So what we're going to do is move this from here to the exact center of here. Now how do we do that? Well, the first thing we need to do is move the object. Get the move command going. Now you can do that on the home tab here, on the modify panel. There's move there. A quicker way of doing it is just to click on the object. Select the object, right click and select move on the shortcut menu. Much quicker. Hover over the center snap there. When you get the 2D center snap there, left click, and then drag the object this way, and you hover over the midpoint snap when it appears there. Do not click on it, otherwise it will place the object there. Then hover over the midpoint snap. It might possibly also be the intersection snap because it's horizontally aligned with this particular object. As I move away now, can you see there's like a little cross on the top midpoint snap there? Can you see that? So I hover there, there's the midpoint snap, it appears this time, and as I come away, can you see those two little green crosses there sitting on the midpoint of each face? As I come down, look, can you see they line in like that? That is object snap tracking kicking in. Now you can have up to 7 points set for object snap tracking like that. I've only got 2, those 2 midpoints, but you can have up to 7, and then as soon as you select an 8th, the first one drops off the radar. So if I now left click at that intersection, I now know that my object is exactly aligned with the midpoint of that face and the midpoint of that face, which means it's dead center of the plate, ready for the 3D object to be welded. So if I now go to my view cube here and do an isometric view like so, you can see there that's sitting there ready to go. It doesn't look central, does it? That's purely because of the way that the views work in 3D. Now let's just have a look at that and just check that though. If I do, let's say, a front view, you'll see there, look, the center snap that we selected, the 2D center snap, was actually the center of where the spigot here fits the base. Now if I zoom in, what I can do here now is I can utilize my object snap tracking again by clicking on the object. I can right click and I can move it again. And what I'll do, I'll pick the center snap here and come up this way and get that exactly on that midpoint there. That's just using regular object snaps. It's now sitting on top of the plate. If I now come here and do an isometric view on the view cube, as you can see, it's moved to a different place. So you've got to be really, really careful with 3D objects and object snaps and object snap tracking. You've got to be really careful where you place these things. So what we've got to do, we've got to move that back to the center. We now know it's at the right elevation, but we've got to get it centrally in the right place. So with our isometric view in place, let's try it again. Let's try and move. So we select the object, right click, and we move. Now we need the center snap at the base there. There it is there. Then we do a midpoint snap hover. Midpoint snap hover, and as we come in, you'll see the intersection and click. Now, that looks a lot more as it should. How do we check? We go to the view cube, and there we are. It's sitting on top of the plate, ready to be welded. And when I do an isometric, it's actually looking central. So be careful with those object snaps and the object snap tracking, especially when using a 3D object.